Okay, good morning. So, just by a show of hands, how many of you guys are familiar with your horoscopes or know like what it pretty much is? Okay, cool. So, like pretty much a lot of you. So something that every single one of us has in common is the want and need to relate to something and being able to fit in with a group that has similar interests. That's just general psychology and basically how humans work pretty much. So when you throw that need in with a practice that is just so prominent and talked about amongst our generation, it's pretty easy to believe and relate to. So that practice is being horoscopes, zodiac, and the astrology. Generally, everyone knows what zodiac sign they are, just seen by like what you guys know here, we pretty much know. What characteristics follow, who we're compatible with, who we're not compatible with. And sometimes people even base, friendships and actual romantic relationships off of what their zodiac signs are. So today, I'm going to talk about the popularity of horoscopes, the many reasons why we obsess over them, and why we should not believe in them, and why they're all false in a form of pseudo-psychology, meaning false or unfounded. Okay, so first I want to discuss some statistics and facts about how horoscopes affect our daily lives. So according to a study done by the National Science Foundation, 58% of 18 to 24-year-olds, Americans, so pretty much like our age range in here, believe astrology is scientific. The study also revealed that skepticism of astrology is actually decreasing, and indeed you don't have to look far online or even just in conversation with friends or family or your significant others to find a community of young, cool, perfectly normal people who obsess over their zodiac signs. So even though like scientifically it's not proven, for some reason we still like want this reassurance and belief that like this is all real and that we're all gonna, believe and follow what our horoscope says for the day, year, month, whatever it may be. So there are also like a lot of many different apps that we can download and that will actually push notifications to us that have entire paragraphs of our horoscope for that day. So a horoscope basically is a forecast of a person's future, typically including a delineation of character and circumstances based on the relative position of the stars and planets of the time that we were born. So most people will read these pretty much like each day, first thing in the morning, and will literally base like our entire day off of what it says. So whether it says like, you need to be careful, the stars aren't in your order today, like you're gonna do something crazy, something obscure, and a lot of people will go about and be very cautious about like what we're doing for the day, or will actually take that into account and like what their decisions may be. But really most of these are basically just generalizations about characteristics and then how to go about and follow and look forward to on our day, and it's all just a general basic thing. So actually about a year ago, NASA conducted a study about the actual constellations that astrology bases the entire zodiac off of. So astrology is basically, zodiac signs are based off the constellations, like Aries, Pisces, Scorpio, like what your actual signs are. And when NASA did this study, they found that there was actually a constellation that the astrologists actually left out. And everyone just went crazy because it threw everyone off, and everyone was just like, oh, well, they just added a zodiac, how did they do that? So NASA actually states astrology is something else. It's not science. No one has shown that astrology can be used to predict the future or describe what people are like based off of their specific birthdays. So some 3,000 years ago, the ancient Babylonians divided the zodiac into 12 different pieces, being those constellations. And each slice of those were actually, they're basically represented by the constellations when the sun would pass through them when the earth was orbiting around the sun. So second, despite not being scientifically proven, so many millennials are actually obsessed with their zodiac sign, and they use it as an excuse for their day-to-day lives. So Austin Klein from thoughtco.com says, astrology offers a number of things which many people find desirable. So this is information and assurance about the future. It's a way to be absolved from our current situations and also maybe future decisions. And it's a way to feel connected to the entire cosmos. So this actually gives off a false sense of something waiting to happen in someone's life, and it's based off what an app or the stars are telling them. So it's so easy to get wrapped up in a form of superstition, which is why this is all still so popular for us today. Astrology also gives people an excuse for maybe their less than positive traits. I'm sure like some of your friends, or maybe you've heard some people when they're talking about their sign, they'll be like, oh, it's not my fault, I'm so indecisive, like I'm a Libra, or I'm sorry, I'm so emotional, like the full moon is in Cancer. Like we all like kind of use these like excuses to like be like kind of just like what the negativity around it. And so we base certain parts of our personality off of like what we're supposed to be according to whatever our specific sign is. So it's a way to deflect and just make excuses on our actions on what we should be doing actually versus just like being ourselves and not trying to like compare to what we're supposed to be based off what the horoscope has told us. There's also some popular articles, maybe you've seen on BuzzFeed or anything too, that people actually will like really feed into and follow. So there's stuff like the pros and cons of marrying him based off his zodiac sign. Or even like there's one that could also be like certain places you should travel based off your zodiac sign. And people really feed into this, like they'll literally like, oh, like I'm gonna go to Paris because I'm a Pisces and I'm like full of love and like all this, and they just wanna go travel over there. So people get really hooked and thinking into this, that this whole idea that our fate is laid out in the stars and solely in what our specific signs are. So lastly, here are the final reasons why we should not believe in our horoscopes and zodiac. So the scientific community rejects astrology as having no explanatory power for describing the universe and considers it a pseudoscience. So again, meaning false or unfounded in science. So scientific testing of astrology has been conducted over many years, and no evidence has been found to support any of these premises or effects outlined in astrological traditions. So there are just so many generalized traits and conclusions that all of these things tell us, and basically how we should be living. So in conclusion, although all of the BuzzFeed quizzes are fun, they may keep you up for hours, the horoscope apps, these intense conversations that you might get in with your friends, your significant other about what characteristics you have, who you're compatible with, etc. It's really nothing but a form of pseudo-psychology, so we shouldn't be trusting them. So next time you meet someone, meet up with your friends, or read your horoscope, don't think too much into it. It's not that serious.
So Melody, what did you think?
She's not here.
Oh, another one. Okay. Brian, I think you could use something better than a rhetorical question and a survey at the beginning of the speech. But I do know what the subject material is going to be. As I was listening to it, I thought at first it sounds like it's going to be an informative speech, but when you get to the third point in your preview, that's where your proposition actually is, and so that's where the argument's going to start. Everything else, I think, is mostly background. In other words, here's the identification of what the problem is, and then the third point is our solution basically is to stop paying attention to this as if it's real. And I think that when you get to that point, you make that pretty clear. The survey information at the first point is okay to suggest that people have a knowledge of the zodiac. I don't know that that necessarily was indicative that people are using this the way you describe it, although you did have some survey information that showed that there are a lot of people who do believe in these kinds of things, and there's the degree of doubters seems to have been growing down. I'm not exactly sure why that is the case. I don't know that it's necessary for you to explain that, but I think it would make it a little bit more interesting if there was something concerning why this particular generation feels a little bit more in tune with this, or wants to look at it as a way of explaining what's going on in their lives. Maybe it has, like you were talking about, there are all kinds of psychological explanations for this, and maybe there's something that's related to the time period that we're dealing with, or issues faced by your particular generation that might have something to contribute to it. The criticism of astrology begins with a reference to a NASA study which mentions that there is an extra constellation, which seems to undermine the idea that we've been getting it right for whatever 1,000 years that we've been using these sorts of things. If we've got the wrong number of constellations, any previous astrological readings seem like they would obviously be off. You've got a quote from NASA. I think it's a little bit vague. I think you want to be more specific. I think you also need some examples of millennials who use these sorts of things. You just kind of take it as a given that this is the case, and I'm not, I've got my doubts about that. I think a lot of people kind of look at it and maybe see it as entertainment, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you have friends that, I can't do something like this because my zodiac sign, so I'm staying home today, or something like that. Or, maybe there's a story of a public figure that does those kinds of things. Or maybe you've seen it on, Instagram or one of those social media sites. Here's some celebrity who says, not signing on this movie because, my star's in, retrograde, and my constellation is, prominent this week or something. Some kind of illustrations of this. As it is, it remains a little bit vague. So I could be a little bit more convinced that there really is a problem here, that people are buying into this. And I thought that you started off suggesting that there was some information there, like I said, with the statistic, with the survey stuff that you had, that you cited. But past that, it feels a little underdeveloped. And the idea that people might buy into this, and your explanation about why they buy into that, that made sense also. And again, I think this is one of those places where I'm sure that there are authorities who have talked about the psychological comfort that somebody gets by, having a way to pass off responsibility or to kind of fit it in with their way of viewing the world. And I think you could get a little bit more serious content in there. I did like the idea of all the BuzzFeed stories as an illustration about how popular this is. But again, I don't know that anybody, I see those stories too, and I just hear the 10 hottest whatever or whatever. That's a way to kill 5 minutes or whatever, but I'm not exactly sure anybody's leading their lives in regard to, I got to go to Europe because, I'm a Pisces. The critical information, you basically say it's a pseudoscience, that there's no evidence that supports it. And I'm going, and what's your source on this? Because it sounds very conclusive, it sounds very certain, and I don't know who it is that's saying this, what organization, institution, research project, authority came down with this particular conclusion. It's like, well, sources say, or somebody told me, or everybody knows, and I'm going, this is your argument, you should be telling us, trying to convince us a little bit. So I think there needs to be more content there. Thank you.